Hello guys, welcome to lesson number 57 in our drawing series, Drawing Techniques for Beginners. Towards the end of the last lesson where we were plotting out our dog's face, what I've started to now do is I've taken away as best as I can the grid lines, and I've just lightened up some of the lines. As you recall, I was using the HB pencil to sketch it out, and I like to lighten it up a little bit because I don't want the actual lines that we've started with to dictate how dark we need to go. I'm going to be using the HB and the 2B pencil today. We've got our kneaded eraser, our brush, and our 18-inch ruler, which we may not need in today's lesson. So without further ado, let's crack on with this. I'm quite happy with the layout that we have at the moment. And what we're going to start with is I'm really going to start to try and work around these eyes. I'm going to start with the pupils, and I'm going to use the HB pencil to start with. Now I'm using my tapered stroke in here and working into the tops, almost where the pupil is meeting the eyelid. Although the reference image, because I'm using only a cheap piece of paper and I've not got a £10,000 printer, these slightly cheaper printers, what they do is that entire pupil will be completely black. It will be the same tone all the way through, whereas what we can do with our drawing is we can emphasize slightly darker areas even in something like the pupil, which is clearly a hole in somebody or something's eye. But we know that this area up towards the top here, excuse me, is always going to be darker because the way that the light is hitting it. So we're just going to try and emphasize that right from the beginning. I'm trying to emphasize the areas that are the darkest, even within our darkest areas. Now I'm going to be very, very careful to try and protect that whiter area, the shine in the eye, which is over slightly to the right on this eye as we're looking at it. I'm going to try and keep as little graphite in there as possible, trying to keep as much of it out as I can, because it's that contrast between the dark pupil and the highlight itself that's really going to set this off. So just working in those tight areas there. Make sure your pencil's sharp. I've sharpened my pencils. I've washed my hands just so that we don't get any unnecessary grease or dirt on the paper. And I've sharpened the pencils as I always do. So just emphasizing this dark ring around the eye. I'm going to need to move my paper slightly now, just so that I'm accurate with my stroke. I really want to make a good start on these eyes, because I do think that these eyes, like we spoke about towards the end of last lesson, that these eyes are the centerpiece of the drawing really. We need as much detail and as much quality contrast within these eyes as we can. And that's really going to be the foundation and the base for the rest of our drawing. It's been nice seeing some of your progress over on the Facebook group. Don't forget to join our Facebook group. It's called Tutorial Tuesdays Beginners to Pro. You can get all of the lessons, all 57 of the lessons that we've done, including this one, over on the group. I've tried to package them into some nice, simple and easy to understand playlists. You're going to need to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell. Now what that means is whenever I do release a new video, you're going to get a little icon that pops up on your mobile phone or your tablet and you're not going to miss out on anything. I'm trying to release a couple a week. I also do some cartoon work and some scribble art as well, if you're interested in that. If there's something that you'd like me to cover in a future video, don't forget to leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the series so far. How can we make it better? How can we make the group better, more inclusive? Are there any projects that you'd like to work on or have a go at? Maybe there's a quick study that you'd like me to have a go at. Maybe it's drawing a certain type of hair, or a study on hands or feet or something like that. Just a quick video. I'm looking for some wintry scenes. We're getting towards Christmas now, and I'd like to do a lovely wintry scene with some snow in there, because I do know that people have asked how on earth you draw snow and things like that with graphite. So I think that would be good. So if any of you have got any sort of royalty-free references, something that we can use that maybe fits in with some of that, then that would be fantastic. So I'm just layering this HB pencil on now, using the tapered stroke, which is pulling the pencil towards me. And I'm building the value up gradually. I can just see I've got a little bit of something on my paper there. I don't know if it's from my hand. If you do notice anything on your paper that's not meant to be there, you're much better off to get rid of it early on. So I'm just using my kneaded eraser there just to try and remove some of that, because all that will happen is it will create issues for me as we go on. Okay, I'm going to come in with the 2B now. I'm going to really just start to darken these up. Like I say, I want these eyes to be the focal point and the real centerpiece of our drawing. Now you'll notice that I don't use anything to blend. So the techniques that I'm teaching don't require any blending stumps, they don't require Q-tips. The only time in the last 57 lessons that I've ever used anything that you would remotely call blending is when I'm doing a background, or in some cases some clouds. I do sometimes use a piece of tissue just to lightly move the graphite around. But other than that, I'm trying to teach you a method of blending and creating value without using blending stumps. The difficulty with blending stumps is we start to grind the graphite down into the paper, and it's almost impossible then for us to remove the graphite, but it also starts to create something called graphite shine, which I know is something that lots of people have struggled with. There's two ways to try and avoid graphite shine. Number one is use charcoal. The particles of charcoal are much rougher, they're not as smooth as graphite. And what happens then is you get less of that shine. The other option is to try and layer your graphite in the way that we're doing now, by smoothing the tooth of the paper out, by flattening it like you would do with a tortillon or a paper stump, whatever you want to call them. What you're doing is you're flattening the tooth of the paper and the actual graphite itself. And what this does is it makes it impossible to remove. And it also gives us that lovely shiny reflective surface, which can be rather off-putting when we're looking at somebody's work. Now don't get me wrong, I have tried tortillons. I was 3.5 years ago, I went on my own journey of trying to learn how to draw realism. It really was the realism that captured me. I'm going back to my HB pencil now, and I'm just going to layer again over. Even though I've gone to a 2B there, I can still get some more value out, and I can start to get rid of some of those speckly white dots, which is the tooth of the paper. Because we haven't gone in with the 2H to start with, or a 4H, you are going to get that a little bit, but we're going to layer so much in this dark area here that I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, where was I? I probably very similar to how you've come across this video. I used to spend hours on YouTube looking at artists and trying to pick up methods and best practices and techniques. And I tried everything: charcoal, coloured pencils, ink pens. I just loved the process. So yeah, I've definitely used tortillons, and I just feel that some of my best work, some of my commissioned work, the work that I'm most proud of, is absolutely not been the work that I've used, where I've used blending stumps and things like that. It's always the work that's taken me the longest, that's using these techniques that I'm trying to teach you. Go and check out the Essential Pencil Skills playlist. I'll put that above in one of the cards that you can click on. And I go through the basics really of how we start to develop some of this technique and the reasons why we're doing certain things. Now, this graphite does move around a lot. I've got it's called a Mono Zero eraser here. It's like a mechanical pencil, but it's got a very thin eraser on the end. I'm just going to try and clean up the shine in the eye as much as I can. Although I haven't been blending, it is very, very easy for some of the graphite to move around. And I don't want that to happen. Okay, let's come back in now with the HB pencil, and we're going to just start working a little bit of the detail in some of this eye. Now I can see from the reference image here that we have these striations, these lines in the eye that sort of move away from the pupil, almost like a wheel with spokes. And there are different values in there, so this isn't all the same value. So I'm just being very, very careful. And again, I'm layering. And we're going to go through a process of layering, getting some texture in there, removing value with the erasers, and going back in. So same on this side, but this eye is less dark because the light is coming from this top right corner. So this eye is going to be slightly darker. Now, because we've only got the one reference image here, it might be solely the light source that's making that left-hand eye look darker. Or the dog itself may have a slightly darker eye. It doesn't matter too much for what we're doing here because we are working just simply off of this reference image. But sometimes it's quite important to get a couple of reference images from the person that you're doing the commission for, if you can. If we're just drawing images from the internet, it's not always possible to do that. But if I had a couple of different reference images of this dog from different positions, I would be able to tell whether the actual left eye as we're looking at it is darker in real life, or if it's simply just this reference image in the way that the light's catching it. But again, like I say, it's not altogether majorly important. Because we can just copy what we see. And that's really important that we understand that concept. Draw what we see, what's there. We don't make things up. We don't add the, unless you're drawing from your imagination, of course, which is something we're not doing at the minute. We are trying to get as much detail from the reference image as we possibly can. We're trying to copy every detail. We're trying to make this drawing slightly better than the last one, which was the Statue of Liberty. I had a lot of fun with that. It's been nice seeing some of your attempts. I think some of you were saying that it was the perspective that you struggled the most with. It was a rather strange perspective, and that's why I chose the reference image, because we see lots of iconic building drawings and things like that, but that one just really caught my eye because of the perspective. But we're going to try and make this drawing 1%, 2% better than the last one. And if we can do that with each drawing, after you've done a few, we really start to see some very quick improvements. Just coming in again now with this 2B. Again, just layering. We're moving the graphite around. I've used the brush a couple of times. The key principles that I go on about so often when we are drawing for realism is contrast. That's the biggie for me. You look at any realistic drawing and it has contrast in it. The more we can add the contrast, the more realistic our drawing appears. So I'm finding the darkest regions of this picture, and I am going to go as dark as I can, as dark as my pencils will allow me. It is also why we have the coloured pencil, the black coloured pencil that I like to use. But whilst we're bringing the contrast up in the darker areas, it's also very important, as you've already seen me doing, I am still trying to make sure that I'm protecting the highlights, the lighter areas. So this shine in our dog's eye is going to be very important for us to capture the realism. So I need to keep protecting that. I need to keep taking out the value that may end up in there. Now look very closely in your reference image. On the shine of this eye, there are some darker areas in there. So this right hand edge is slightly lighter than this edge towards the left hand corner up here. And I need to create that, because it's going to give that eyeball a realistic spherical look to it. It's always super important that your reference images are as of higher quality as possible. There's been a few drawings recently that people have asked me to do for them as a commission, and they've just sent me some very grainy looking pictures of, you know, whatever it is, a family member or an animal. And the reference image has been awful. And I've said to them, I'm not going to draw that, because I'm putting my name to something that I'm not going to be able to do it justice. So we end up trying to get a different image, and sometimes, if it's possible, go and take a picture of them, or of the subject or object, whatever it may be. So that you're happy with it. Whenever we're doing portraits, it's always really important that we have a single light source. So as you can see on this picture of Myla, we've got a single light source. It's coming from this top right, and the shadowed area is on this side. It's very difficult to make things look super realistic if we've got multiple light sources. Forward facing light sources are always quite difficult as well to capture. If you cast your mind back to the sphere project that we did, we were always working with the presumption that the light source was coming from one of the corners, from the left or the right. That gives your brain enough of a tug in one direction to create the rest. I'm just going to brush that in slightly now. I'm actually going to do something I wasn't planning on doing. I'm going to come in with my Faber-Castell black pencil coloured pencil now, and I'm just going to bring the darkness out of this straight away. Now, I don't ever do this, but I just want to pull these eyes forwards, and I want to get a sense for how dark I am with these eyes. Like I've said numerous occasions, these eyes are the centre point for us. They're the focal point. So I want to try and get as much information in there as I can. So again, I'm just layering on this black coloured pencil. I use the Faber-Castell pencils for details like this, for finishing off my graphite drawings, because they do hold the point very well. The Prismacolors that I have are very soft, and what that does is it's brilliant for skin tones and when we're trying to blend, but it's not always the best for finer details. Now this addition of this dark black into these areas is really going to allow me to work in the highlighted areas and to see how dark I need to go in the rest of the pupil and in the iris itself. Again, we're layering. I'm not just bearing down straight away and taking this to its ultimate value. There's a few art teachers that I've learnt from in the past that would be turning in their grave right now if they saw me doing this. I learnt from some very traditional artists and teachers that they'd only ever want you to use pencils. You know, I know a lot of people that swear by the craft of creating with just pencils and never using a charcoal and never using a black, certainly not a black. But you can already see we're starting to create the character and the depth in these eyes that we want to capture. Now I need to try and bring out some of the value in that highlight again. I'm just using my kneaded eraser there just to dab some of the value out. Now I can come back in with my HB pencil and the Mono Zero and just start to take out some of those slight highlights. There's a slight texture to this dog's eye, as I'm sure there is to every creature's eye. It's the tiny little muscles that are connected to the pupil, which is ultimately a hole, that open and close. So with this HB pencil now, I'm just bringing out some of those striations, I think we would call them. And it's possibly quite difficult for you to see from the camera angle that we've got. But I'm paying so much attention to those little details. Because ultimately that's what's going to make or break this drawing. I want a definite edge to this pupil. I don't want it to fade into the iris. There's a definite end to our pupil there. And again, even though I've got some of that black coloured pencil under there, I can still get value out with my 2B pencil, because I haven't burnished, I haven't taken the pencil to its ultimate value by pushing as hard as I can. I can remove a little bit more of the highlight in there with the kneaded eraser, just gently dabbing on. So I'm protecting that. That's what I like to call it. I'm protecting the highlight. Just see a little bit of graphite that's got onto the paper there. So again, I'm just bringing some of the value out with the 2B, even though we've got a light coverage of the black coloured pencil in there. Now, eyeballs are spheres. They're perfectly round spheres. So the edges, as they're tucking into the eyelids itself, are always going to be darker. Cast your mind back to the sphere. As it goes away from the light, it gets darker. So that's something that we need to be mindful of. As we're drawing our eyeballs. And remember that the only thing really that's white is the highlight. Even on a person whose eyeballs, the whites of the eyes look very, very white, anything that we leave the same value always looks flat. So I can see I need to just define the edge of the pupil over here. It is like it was on the left-hand eye. It was losing its fidelity and its definition, and it was sort of blending into the iris itself. And we don't want that to happen, because that's not what's happening on the image. We've got a definite edge to the pupil. So I brush a little bit of that in. Now, being careful to use the edge of my brush, I can now see that I'm looking slightly dark around this area. Now, that might be an optical illusion, because I haven't got any value in around the rest of the dog, the fur itself. So I'm just going to take a little bit out there, but I'm just being careful not to fall into the trap of thinking that this needs to be lighter, when the reality of it is it may be looking too light because of the surrounding values. Okay, so I'm quite happy with those for now. So coming back to my 2B pencil, I'm just now going to start bringing out some of this edge. I'm going to start working now like we normally do in the darkest regions. This is one of those opportunities where we're going to have what we call a hard edge. This is between two objects that are crossing over one another. So the edge of the dog's face and its body, its neck area, they are intersecting one another. One's overlapping the other. And we know that the dog's face is sitting over the top of the body. So this edge here needs to be what we call a hard edge. We need to demonstrate that this line is sitting over the line of the body. A soft edge, where we don't have that definite edge to the value, is what we have on something that's showing a shape or a curve. So this muzzle here, as it's coming round, we've got very soft and no definite edges to anything, because what we're really showing there is not one part covering something else, not the edge of something, but what we're really showing there is the light is travelling around something that's rounded. And by finding those opportunities within your drawing as often as you can and really emphasising them is what takes your drawing from looking like a flat, two-dimensional piece of work to something that has dimension and character and almost pops off of the page. Now, I do love to work in the darkest areas to begin with. We then bring the value up in the lighter areas, and we reach a point where we're happy we can stop. If we work in the lightest areas to begin with, if we go too dark in the lightest areas, we then by contrast have to bring the darker areas up maybe to a darker level than we would have wanted to, or than we needed to. You don't necessarily need to copy the exact value that we're seeing on the reference image. That isn't something that we have to do. It's something that you can do, and if you've got black, you go to black, and you can use a value finder. You can print one off of the internet. It's just a piece of card with different greys going into black, and you can place that over the reference image and match the square or tile that is closest to the value on your reference image, and then take it over to your drawing and see if you're anywhere near. More often than not, in fact, every time I've drawn and I've used a value finder, I've always needed to go darker. I don't ever recall a time when I've placed the value finder onto the reference image and then placed the value that I found on the reference image on the value finder onto my drawing and ever needed to back up on my drawing itself. I've never ever gone too dark. Yet every single drawing that I, certainly over the last couple of years, maybe recently I'm getting better at it, every single drawing that I work on, I always assume I've gone too dark in certain areas. And I know we've had many conversations over on the Facebook group about going too dark and being afraid to go darker. But yet, the evidence suggests that we always, almost certainly, undervalue or add less value with that fear of going too dark, and we can actually go much, much darker. So I think the motto, or the moral of the story, not the motto, is don't be afraid to go darker. So I'm just bringing out some of this darkness under the chin area of Myla. Just working the tapered stroke and pulling the pencil towards me. Now you can see by doing this with the 2B pencil, the reason why when we're drawing skin and we need smooth textures and we need smooth value changes, why we don't start with the softer pencils, because I can see quite a lot of the underlying tooth of the paper now coming through. Because I'm using the soft pencil, I've not filled the underside of, or sorry, the lower parts of the tooth of the paper with the harder pencils. And what that's creating, it's creating this slightly mottled effect where I'm starting to see some of the tooth of the paper through it. We're going to be able to get through that by layering, and like I've said, if you actually look at the picture of our dog, we haven't got this very smooth, saturated texture under there. It's a furry creature. And what I might do just in some of those places is just go into that with some of the HB. Because the HB is a slightly harder pencil, which means that the particles and the fragments of graphite that come off of it will be smaller, and it will allow me to just get down, and I can see straight away that that's what's happening. It's just allowing me to get down into the recesses in there and just get a slightly better value. So what possibly might have been a better idea there is to have started with the HB. But hey, it's a learning. I've never drawn this picture before. This is something that I'm drawing for the very first time. I've drawn things like it, so there's always something new to learn. But just the addition of that HB there is just bringing the value up, but it's giving me better saturation. It's filling the tooth of the paper. And then a little bit more 2B on that will again increase all of that for me. And this isn't all just one block of value under here. If you look carefully at it, we've got some very subtle changes. We've got some undulations and some underlying bone structures and flaps of skin and muscles that, even though it's in the darkest area, we really want to be highlighting those and trying to incorporate them into our drawing. Because that's when people are going to look at it and go, wow, you know, you've really captured the likeness. It's not just a generic Weimaraner. This is my Weimaraner. This is how my dog looks. You've got the direction of the fur perfect, or the angle of the nose correct. So again, using this HB, I'm just going to bring down some value into this lip area where this is the underside of the mouth. So again, we have another one of those, what we call a hard edge or a clean edge, because this part of the mouth is going up and under. And as we've gone through in the last 56 lessons, I've spoke to you at depth about this. Understanding the principles of light are critical. And it's very simple. The further away something gets from the light source, the darker it becomes. Whether that's a dark area already or a light area. So if this dog was a white dog, we'd almost have exactly the same value in these areas as we've got now working with a dark grey dog or a grey coloured dog. Now I don't want to come down too far into this because if we look at the edge of that lip, it's highlighted. It's lighter than the rest. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to bring in some 2B now into the underside of that. This is going to be the darkest area, so I'm going to keep working in that area and then bringing my tapered strokes out. I need to move my paper slightly. So I think I'm pretty happy now to leave you to crack on with this. Where do I want you to be for the start of the next lesson? I want you to have just brought out some of the value in this darker side under the mouth. I'm going to work in these dark areas around the ears. So these areas that we can see black, I'm going to just start. What I thought I was going to do was go with the 2B. I'm actually going to work with the HB in those areas because we've just discovered that actually we don't want it to look too mottled and make more work for ourselves as we go on. So I'm going to work with the HB in those areas, very similar to what I've just been doing in this last section of the drawing. Work in those dark areas with the HB, maybe layer a little bit of 2B on there. Use the brush, really making sure that we do keep the value going in all of those areas there. Keep maintaining your darks in the eyes and make sure that you keep protecting that highlight in the dog's eyes. So keep taking the value out with your kneaded eraser or the Mono Zero eraser or whatever you have to hand. Probably going to spend another half an hour to an hour on this one. But I'm quite happy with how Mila's looking so far. Those eyes are starting to get some character in there. Carry on, take it a step at a time. Don't rush it. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications icon. Follow me on Instagram. That's at artisticn1k and I'll follow you back. And I look forward to seeing your work on the Facebook group. And I'll see you at the next video. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. Smack the notifications button. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.